Hello and welcome, glad you could join today. In today's video, I want to talk about Ascension symptoms, which haven't spared me either, and how I personally managed to achieve self-healing with a very special exercise. I'll be discussing that here. It's a very exciting topic, stay tuned. My name is Ralph Riedel and I have been following the shamanic path for almost 20 years. And today I really want to speak openly about the intense processes that are active during these current ascension energies, which spare no one. So everyone goes through these processes, and feel free to comment if you might be experiencing the same thing today. Suddenly, a severe process arose within me in which I felt completely overwhelmed and had to fully surrender completely to this process. Thoughts came up like, I can't do it. Yes, really extreme considerations whether I should continue the YouTube channel at all or if I should stop, which practically paralyzed me. And then tears welled up inside me and I couldn't think clearly anymore in that moment at all. Yes, and when I realized that, I dropped everything completely and utterly. Even though it was difficult for me, I first tried to feel into it, because in this process, which was really very intense, I felt this process or this pain the most in my body. And for me, it was in the heart area. And then, just like now, I placed my hand on my heart and immersed myself in this feeling. And the deeper I went, it quickly became clear that it wasn't me feeling this emotion, but the little Ralph who felt overwhelmed, wanted to be held, and simply couldn't and didn't want to handle the situation anymore. And in that moment, I really let all the emotions come up and tears came too, more and more tears. And at this point, feelings want to flow, and I really surrendered to that. And then scenes from my childhood came up, where exactly this feeling of being overwhelmed, not being able to make it, having to strive, being someone who you truly are not in order to be liked. And this feeling was really very intense, and in that moment, I truly gave myself permission to feel it. And after a short time, I continued to imagine that, in my mind, the big Ralph is now there for the little Ralph and takes over what the little Ralph had previously tried to carry, and I could clearly see that. And at first, I thought that the process, once I was in it, would suddenly be over. And then the next wave rose up within me. It was as if I felt the sense of being overwhelmed on the surface. And when I allowed myself to go deeper and deeper, there was another feeling underneath that I had never experienced before. I was really ashamed of being overwhelmed or being the small one, not being strong. Yes, and this shame is ultimately still deeply embedded in every cell of my being. And that was ultimately the key for me, to really accept this shame as well, indeed. Because ultimately, it's also about allowing yourself to feel ashamed of something. You are also allowed to feel overwhelmed. And that is completely normal and perfectly fine in the absolutely awakening process. And it's not actually about pushing your feelings away, truly denying them, or rejecting the ego. And that's when I discovered the feeling for myself that everyone wants to be real, to be authentic, but only outwardly, showing their best side. But it's exactly and precisely about turning to these feelings right now and being indeed authentic in this very moment. In this moment, you don't have to play anyone else but who you truly are. And whatever feelings may be present, there can also be other feelings. That you learn to accept this feeling as well, and in a way embrace yourself, to ultimately achieve self-healing. But not to rush into self-healing as quickly as possible, as I can feel it for myself now, but simply to be there for oneself. That's how I would describe it. Being there for yourself. And then this feeling is allowed to be there, and then self-healing rises within you. And you can feel free to comment if you are experiencing something similar. I have the feeling that many people are going through this right now. And the key is to learn to accept yourself as you are. Because I also know a client who went through something very similar, and she sat, for example, for 3 hours on the sofa, completely rigid, completely motionless, and utterly powerless, and ultimately had to surrender to this feeling. Sometimes it also takes time, and you need to completely press the pause button in that moment. You might also be forced to press the pause button and not want to run away from the feeling as quickly as possible, but instead take the time for yourself, to give to yourself. Yes, and the ultimate byproduct is that when you have learned to be there for yourself, You give yourself the space to be who you truly are. So these small, wounded parts that are completely overwhelmed, that are sad, that are angry, desperate, or have other feelings and emotions, they are allowed to be there. And then self-healing comes, which is not intended but simply arises because you have learned to be there for yourself. And with this exercise, you can easily learn. So if you take your time here, for example, bring the feeling to mind again, even if it is currently active, and try to find out where this feeling is located. Then, simply allow yourself to go deeper and deeper into it, if you have the courage not to run away from this feeling, but to dive into it, so that you can then move towards self-healing. Understand that you are perfectly fine just the way you are, and you don't need to be ashamed of feeling ashamed. It is perfectly okay to feel that way. Well, as I delved deeper, images from my very early childhood also often and vividly surfaced, where I genuinely and deeply felt truly ashamed of being who I really am. And then I always tried hard to be someone else, to finally be loved, to finally be recognized. And I had exactly this feeling of being driven as well. The feeling was coupled with this sense of being overwhelmed in my example. For you, it might be a different example because especially when you feel the way you do, being completely genuine and accepting everything within you as you are right now, that's the challenge. Especially in such moments, learning to stay true to yourself and be authentic. And only then does a feeling of liberation arise because you no longer build up pressure within yourself to be someone else, to take on a role or to fulfill an inner expectation. This dissolves in that moment. For you, it could naturally be a different feeling at that moment, such as sadness or a feeling of being less worthy, or perhaps even a completely different emotion. Yes, and feel free to write to me about what is currently active for you. Maybe something completely different is active, and I do read every comment, even if I don't respond to them because I simply don't have enough time. I find it very interesting to see what processes my community is going through and how I might be able to help you achieve so-called self-healing. And by now we have already talked about self-healing a few times. Yes, and self-healing, what does self-healing mean? Healing means being completely present with yourself in this moment, being able to let everything flow depending on the area of life. And it can be for you, for example. It could be something entirely different, whether you want to heal your finances or your relationship with money, for example. Or if you want to heal your partnership because you desire a deeper relationship with your partner. Or perhaps you want to live out your professional side more. Depending on which area of life you want to live more fully. In a way, this is what your soul longs for, wanting to express itself, where self-healing can also be active. So ultimately, it's about showing yourself completely real and authentic in every area of life. And depending on where you want to focus, you can concentrate exactly on that and then use this exercise, for example, to go into self-healing. Or depending on what is currently active for you. And for that very reason, I have even developed a shamanic self-healing course for a very small fee, where you truly get the essence with all the shamanic techniques and meditations. And there, my nearly annual knowledge flows in, for example, with this exercise, how you can achieve self-healing. But of course, there are many more things involved, much deeper exercises, for example, to get to know your feelings at all, what is active within you, what blockages you might be carrying, and how you can manage to get your feelings to flow. Because feelings want to flow, yes, whether they are heavy feelings or beautiful feelings. Feelings are like moving energy. Emotion is also called that, and it translates to moving energy. The great thing about the course is that it stays with you for a lifetime, and you can repeat these exercises at your own pace whenever such intense processes are active. I have placed the link to the Shamanic Self-Healing course below the video in the description. Then you can watch it at your own pace in peace. It really is still close to my heart to help as many people as possible get through these ascension processes well. Of course, I am very happy if this exercise has also helped you to better manage your processes. Until next time, see you then. Bye. Goodbye.